Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming. I recognize most of you here. For those who don't know me, I'm Megan McDonald. I'm the research librarian here at the History Center, and we are very excited to be able to host this event here in our space. We also just received some papers from Charlotte, her archives, so we'll have those in our collection here soon, and I'm excited to dig through them with my volunteers to see what kind of gems are in there. But yeah, I just want to thank everyone for coming out. If you have time afterwards, feel free to walk around our gift shop, check out our museum. We have some really good exhibits up there right now. And at this point, I'm really just going to hand it over to Penn, who's going to do the official introduction and get things going. So thank you very much.
Great. Thanks. Great. Well, it's actually a real honor for me to be here. I'm the publisher of the book, courtesy of her not knowing any better than that. But I do want to reintroduce Julia Lawson. If you don't know Julia already, she and Charlotte worked 5 years putting the manuscript together. But as I'm sure she would claim, every word in this is hers, is Charlotte's. I just want to point out one quick thing. We will have question and answer. So Charlotte's going to speak about something kind of unique. I'm not going to let you know what it is, but it's a sneak preview of something really interesting. But the photographs that are in this book here, if you have a copy, these photos were literally just arrived from the HT archives here to the museum as negatives. And so we put a table right there and went through the negatives trying to find original photographs of Charlotte's 1971 election, which we did. And now I'm not a doctor and I can't read x-rays, let alone negatives, because they're backwards, forwards, and upside down, and what's white is black. It's crazy. But we did get those, and it was really a lot of fun. And it's a very important thing about the museum, is really what I'm saying, how important it is to have a resource like this for researchers such as this. Now, I'm going to turn it over to Charlotte, who I'm sure you all know, and say something now, and we'll see if we've got sound and go.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, hold it as close to your mouth as you can.
Okay. Does that better?
Yes.
Okay, I'll just leave it there. Raise your hand if you can. I brought my hot toddy, my medical assistant for my voice. My voice is the worst thing that I have going for me now, so I'm lucky to be as healthy as I am. Without a voice, though, that's hard for me. Can you hear me now? Okay. All right. Thank you all for coming. I think I know pretty much all of you here, and you may know all about me already. The book revealed some more, I'm sure. I'm amazed at how much I could remember and how many things that in the book people have mentioned ring a bell with them, and that's nice. This is a community I came to from Ann Arbor with my family in 1964, and I did not want to come here, I have to tell you. This is the last place I wanted to end up, but here we are. And once I was here, I decided to make the best of it, and it just happened. Just wondered, from 64 to 71. My life changed. I had 2 children, and we got to know the town. And one of the things that bothered me when we came here was that there were no sidewalks. And I have to say, I'm sorry to say there are still no sidewalks many places in the city. We still have work to do. But I come from Wisconsin and Minnesota, and the little towns there all have sidewalks, just in case you wondered. So I ended up, while I was here, finishing my doctor's degree in, of all things, historical linguistics. It's a great preparation for running a town. But I did finish it in the German department here, where I taught for a year or so. I taught graduate courses, and they offered me a job that I could refuse, and I did. So I'm not a linguist anymore, except I think I watch language very carefully and listen to it very carefully, and I still love linguistics and languages. But we went to we went to Czechoslovakia at the end of 1968, 67, 68. Czechoslovakia had the Prague Spring, if you remember, and that was 1968. And then it was gone. We were planning. My husband was being sent by the State Department to the university in Bratislava, which is the capital of Slovakia, right on the Danube, where the Danube runs in. And Austria's here, and Hungary's here, and Slovakia's there. So it's a very international place. And it was totally shut. Nobody from Bratislava could go to Austria or Hungary. And we were given multiple entry visas and treated like royalty in this communist town, because by the time we got there, the Prague Spring was overthrown by the Warsaw Pact. They marched in across the Danube into the plaza in front of the university, which was on the end of the bridge. And when the students ran over to the tanks and climbed up with flowers, some of you may remember those pictures. They said, "You don't stop. You're our friends." They said this in Russian because you had to learn Russian. And the people in the tanks, as it turned out, were from Central Asia and did not speak Russian. They were some of those socialist republics in Central Asia and on the Ural Mountains. So the soldiers, not thinking they were being attacked by flowers, just shot these students. And what I remember, they killed a number of students and other people. And when we got there, we were shown around the city, and there was a wall at the university that was covered with flowers everywhere. And we said, "What is that?" "Well, these are tributes to the students and people who were shot by the Warsaw Pact people." And that was shattering. I mean, to think that happened right there. So we acknowledged how sad that was and so forth. And then one day we drove downtown to where that was, and there were no flowers. And in fact, the wall had been plastered. All of the names had been plastered off, and they had effaced the memory of these people. And that really touched me, that this is an unkind situation, to not even allow recognition of something terrible that had happened. And I assume that if Russia were, God help us, to win to make its mark in the Ukraine, that it would also be plastered over. It would be in an attempt to conceal all the stuff that had gone wrong. So that left a deep impression on me. And I wondered why we were there and treated so well, how such a thing could happen in a country. How did a bunch of peace-loving people who were, they enjoyed food, they enjoyed dancing, they enjoyed literature, they enjoyed art, they enjoyed the outside. People always went walking in the forest. That was something that they loved there. How did this happen, that in this country full of very nice people, how did it turn out that they are now ruled by people who are not very nice and who are very unforgiving, and for whom it was no longer legal to speak out, say anything negative against the government. And meanwhile, we were listening to the Voice of America, which was a government-run program, station under Nixon, who wasn't our least conservative. He was not our most progressive, however you want to talk. He was not pro-communist, of course, but he let the Voice of America run programs about the invasion of Cambodia, and we heard, and it was all negative, how we'd made a mistake. Our government had made a mistake, and this was all discussed very in depth on the Voice of America, our nationally funded radio station. So the comparison was just drastic in my mind, and I got back here in 1970 to find out that the Democratic Party in this town had had a little revolution of its own because of the primary in 1968, in which this town was very strongly for Eugene McCarthy, and Bobby Kennedy came in at the end, and people in Bloomington were not happy about that. Not everybody. There were people who supported Bobby Kennedy, but a lot of them weren't happy. And McCarthy carried this county readily, easily. But the state Democratic Party decided when Bobby Kennedy was killed in June 6, 1968, in San Francisco, in Los Angeles, that they would give the delegates that he'd won to the third person running for the delegates to the National Convention. And that was the former governor of Indiana. And he was a nice man, but he didn't, it was pretty obvious to the people in this town that if Bobby Kennedy didn't get the votes, then it should have gone to McCarthy. And so there was a revolution here. And the people in this town just said, how does our Democratic Party get elected? And they found out, well, people do it. And so they set out to change the leadership in our Democratic Party here. And I got back from Czechoslovakia just at this point. And I had been very active in Ann Arbor in the JFK election. So I knew something about campaigning. And Mark Haggerty, some of you may know Mark Haggerty, a really interesting guy in this town, who was a Vietnam veteran and who was a very strong anti-war activist, has been elected precinct committeeman where I lived. And he wasn't going to do any organization. So people asked me to be his vice chair. And I said, I'll be his vice chair if he promises not to do anything. We get along. We're still friends, but he did promise. So anyway, so I got my precinct to run. And out of that, to make a long story short, we carried, I got the precinct committee, and I was asked, because I knew how to organize, to consider running for a city council. And I said, I can't do that. I don't know anything about that. And the county chair at that time said, Charlotte, you can do it. Just go to one of our council meetings here. You'll find out. You can do them. You can learn. And so I did go to a council meeting, and we had a big uproar going on about this construction of a high-rise senior citizens home on Kirkwood and Dunn. And that was not very popular at the time. And so there were lots of people at the council meeting raising their hands. You can read about this. They had just come from the mayor's office, and they had laid their coats on the mayor's couch because they didn't have a peg to hang their coats on, the city council. And then they would walk, then they marched in, sat down, and started reading the ordinances by title only. And everybody was kind of not sure what was going on. And they just were buzzing through the thing. And people were going like this, trying to get their attention, and totally ignored. And I said, I could do better than that. and I decided I would run, and I ran very hard, and that's why I won that election. And I was, I was a woman, my gosh, and a woman doesn't run for city council. That was, and I had a doctor's degree, but I was always Charlotte, and Dr. Day, Harry Day, was always Dr. Day. So I had an uphill battle all the way around. But I won. Amazing, as you can see on the book cover. And the headline was, "This Zietlow, the somewhat inferior candidate." I don't know what that meant. I never have understood that. But I did win, and then my fellow council members elected me president. And I talked to Jim Ackerman recently, who's still alive. He's the only other one of us who's still alive. He lives at Meadowood. And I asked him, I said, "Jim, how did that happen? How did I get to be chair of the council?" And he said, "Charlotte, you were our leader." I didn't realize that, but that's what they thought. So then I felt, okay, if I'm here, I better do a good job, because otherwise no woman will have a chance again. I better work hard and just keep going. So that brings us up to the idea of this book. It was a wonderful campaign. I worked with 7 other Democrats who won in the city council and the mayor, and we were all really different from each other. As if you've read the book, you know. Really, we came from different backgrounds. We had different concerns, but we all were committed to having an open government of the sort that I thought that we should have. We should have government where people talk to each other and listen to each other, and we also understood that the city council was an independent board according to state statute. City council is one of the checks and balances on the power of the mayor, and we had a city judge who also ran. So that year, the city judge that was elected was Republican, Bill Andrews, and he was wonderful. And we got along so well. And one of the most audacious things we did, and probably one of the smartest things we did, was that very first meeting in January of 1972, that our first ordinance, or our first resolution, was naming Jack Morrison #1 on the council. And it seemed a little silly to some of the people in town, but he was a Republican. He's the only Republican on the council, and we knew that he knew how to do things. He knew how to run a meeting, and that we were going to need some guidance in that, and we wanted him to feel included. That everything wouldn't be 8-1. That we wanted to include him in that, and so we passed this resolution naming Jack Morrison #1 on the council, and he was really touched by that. It was a really good start in having a council that worked together to solve issues or to address issues, and I'm very hopeful that we return to those days again, where people can talk to each other who are on the council and to the people in the rest of the community without rancor and without antipathy. We need that in this time. So my book, I wrote partly just to say this is what we did, and this is how we did it, and we were very effective. I think we really changed the nature of Bloomington, and somehow, one of the last things we did was create the farmers market, which is sadly, under duress these days. And I hope we can get back to the unity we used to have. And the other thing we did was pass the gay rights ordinance in 1975. which was it was an addition to the Human Rights Ordinance, which we created just at the beginning of our tenure, and then we added to that this time, and we added a staff. We were able to find money for an attorney to help enforce that Human Rights Ordinance. So we were extremely active as a council, sometimes pulling Frank McCloskey along with us, sometimes bucking him, sometimes doing it together, but we got along. So then we get up to this book, and for years I thought that was what we did was a good story and one that has prevailed in more or less for 40 some years, and I see that dissolving now. So this book has some political intention to it. I would like it to be a primer in how to behave. I'm not sure everybody would agree with me. I'm sure they wouldn't, but I think we got a lot of we saw our job as solving problems, not as bickering, and we tried to work out differences among us so we could go forward. And that worked really. That's why we got so much done, I think, and that has prevailed. And I took that when I left the council, I ended up running for Congress, and then I didn't win that, of course. Although I worked really hard and learned a lot about what West Central Indiana, and it was really great experience. There are really interesting people in this state and lots of interesting things going on. And at that time, in many towns, little factories worked for them. And I don't know whether globalization killed them or not, but anyway, those little factories aren't there everywhere where they were at the time. But then I did get elected county commissioner against all odds, because I guess I got elected because I defeated somebody who was a 12-year incumbent and was not very friendly. He was rude to his fellow commissioners and to his county council. He treated them unkindly, with no respect. And I worked very hard, and I won by a hair. But I did win. And then I got the wonderful opportunity to solve space needs in the county. So this book does not have anything about county government in it, but it does have the foreshadow of how we ran the county government after that. Because right away, my fellow commissioners were Warren Henniger, who's a nice guy, and a bit prickly, and Phil Rogers, the Republican, who nobody had ever heard talk. He just didn't talk because his fellow Republican always shut him up. But I found out he was a really fine fellow. And so we became allies in many ways. And I learned, so I was working with Republicans. And Norm Anderson was president of the county council at that time. And then I want to tell you a really nice story. Don Wagner was a member of that council. Well, in 1975, when we passed the gay rights ordinance, Don Wagner was adamantly opposed, and there was enormous, almost violent opposition to us doing that. And Don Wagner was a leader. He was a shoe salesman at Eastland Plaza, and he was a very, very, very devout Christian, very, very conservative. And we were denounced as hell, going to hell, and I was a Jezebel, and there was a ad in the paper with red flames on it that Don paid for. Well, anyway, so Don lost that one. But when I got to be commissioner, Don was on this county council. And I thought, oh my goodness, I'm supposed to do something here, and I'm going to have to work with this county council. Well, Don Wagner, I set out to learn to know the members that I didn't know, like Norm Anderson, who was just a stellar fellow, and Don Wagner. And I just had lunch with them, and I talked to them about their family and about what we, what our views of the world were and how they were different and so forth. And I just want to say, at some point very early on, Don took me aside and said, Charlotte, I was wrong. And I said, what do you mean? He said, I had a very good friend who had a son who he dearly loved, who was a wonderful singer at Jacobs School. And he graduated from a Jacobs School and went to New York to seek his fortune as an opera singer. And this was the early 80s. And what happened? He died of AIDS. And it made Don so unhappy. He felt so bad for his friend. And he loved this boy too, this young man. But Don, his mind shifted with the new information, the new experience. And when in 1987, I ran for Congress, I said, and when I did, I ran around the 7th district, and I tried to go to men's meetings, the Rotary meetings and exchange and so forth. And I was not allowed in, or was not allowed to talk because women were not invited. But in 87, the Supreme Court made a decision to that since men were deducting their dues to Rotary from their taxes as a tax, the women had to do that too. It had to be even, and so women had to be admitted to these men's service club. And Don Wagner came to me and said, Charlotte, he said, I wonder if you would allow me to sponsor you for Rotary. I thought that's one of the nicest stories I have about what happened and why I have hope for people getting together, even though it sometimes takes 14 years. I hope you don't mind my telling that story, but for me, it's a really wonderful, wonderful experience. And something it does tell me, and of course, we have the courthouse because we got people to work together on getting the courthouse. So the lessons that I learned in writing this book, or that I write about in this book, are lessons that I carry with me. And I really was hoping that they would help people understand and gives them some hope that we can have a more peaceful town and country. That it is possible to work with people you don't agree with, and as if you can hang in there long enough, it often turns out right. So that's why So that tells you something about my feeling about this book. I think it's an object lesson. I thought of it as a primer. So I would like you to ask me questions. If you say, why in the world did you do that, Charlotte? Anybody have some questions? Answers? Did I frighten you?
Charlotte, so this book you said took 7 years?
Well, I started it about the time when Paul was dying. It was in my head. And then one night I was in Burlington, Vermont with my daughter, and I had my computer, and I got up and I outlined the book on the computer. That was about 7 or 8 years ago. Yeah, and then, of course, then my eyesight got worse, but then it was harder and harder to see what I was doing. And
thank you for persevering. And what would you say, have you noticed things that might have changed from that time in Vermont when you were outlining the book and when you completed the book?
Yes, I have.
Okay.
Yes, I've noticed that we have for example, in the city council seldom argues with the mayor, and they seldom.
What was that, Charlotte? The city council
seldom argues with the mayor in any forceful way. That I don't understand it, and I've talked to a number of them. I say, you can answer, you can talk back. It's okay, you can talk back, but I think that's unfortunate because Frank McCloskey didn't. He was a new mayor. He didn't know what he was doing, but he was a good mayor, and we did get to talk to him. We argued a lot. In fact, we argued a great deal, but sometimes we won and sometimes he won. But we didn't think of it that way. Sometimes we solved a problem and sometimes we didn't. And I think that I do not see the city engaging in issues as problems, but as more or less as debate fields. Because we have 5 to 4 things, and I really think that's not necessary. I think it could be worked out, but and besides that, a very important thing I hope this comes across is that the mayor is the mayor, but he's not the dictator. Or it shouldn't be this. Our goal in this election was to have the community help us govern. That's so that I would come to the city council meeting like here, and I'd say, here's the issue. And if you've read the book, I went back and read the minutes of our meetings for 6 years. First of all, the minutes of the meetings starting in 1972 are very, very detailed. And because that was part of our goal, was to keep a good record so we would know what the basis of decisions were and how that happened. So you can really learn a lot from the minutes. But our goal was to be inclusive. So in the very first meeting in January of 1972, what did we do? We said, sir, you all come, bring your issues, and we had a group of downtown merchants. They were Republicans, and on the north side of the square, who had Bob Hammondtree. You may know him. He had a printing shop on the north side of the square on 6th Street, and he came in with the support of a bunch of downtown merchants and others that he knew to ask that we start recycling. That was 1972, and we said, that's a wonderful idea. What can you do to help us make that happen? And we kind of, pronounced him head of the recycling effort. And we did that with issue after issue after issue. And that was exactly what we intended to do. So I don't know, if some of you here are very interested in environmental stuff, we created an environmental commission with a staff immediately, and we got people to work on it from the community. So Warren Henniger and Barbara Russell and people who were really, really pushy involved with environmental concerns were included in our deliberations and in our thinking. And in the very first meeting also, the people from SPIA came, and SPIA was brand new that year. It started in 1972, and they came with a resolution to be on the alert of the necessity to save Lake Monroe and to keep it clean as a water source. And I think it was a long resolution, and we read it at the meeting. And one of us, Wayne Fix, he was a soil and water conservation officer here, and he was very knowledgeable, and most of us were not. But these guys laid out the importance of preserving Lake Monroe as our water source for the entire area. And, you know, and so this was an issue that we hadn't really paid much attention to in the campaign, but we were aware of it. And we listened to them all that night. And we all voted yes on the resolution, which was unbinding, of course. But it did set us on a pace to deal with it. And we asked the people who introduced it to help us with that. That's the way we approached the public, was to say, well, you've got an issue, help us solve it. And we appointed somebody from, you know, each one of us on the council had our specialties. And so different people were working with different groups. I ended up working with social services. We had a lot of positions on boards and commission that were kind of like guest appointments to CAP and to a number of other things. And I took on many of those because I don't know, because I'm a woman, maybe. Anyway, but everybody had something that they were working on, every member of the council, and they would champion this cause or that cause. And that meant not only the city, certainly the mayor, and not only the city council, but we grabbed a bunch of people in the community to help us address issues. Jim Ackerman worked with the animal control people, which was not there were two groups that were kind of fighting each other at the time, the city shelter and the Humane Society. And he worked with him for a long time. So it was none of it easy, but that was our approach, and that is not the approach now. So that's a big difference. And I think it was effective at a time like this where people get at swords point about things. I think the idea should be and can be and has been to try to find out what other people are thinking and see how we can get together and consolidate our goals that will meet both of our needs. And of course, an obvious experience that I had, not an easy one, was saving the courthouse. That was not, because when I got to be commissioner, Warren and Phil said, okay, Charlotte, you're here now. You take over space needs. We've been working on it for 25 years, but now you do this. And of course, I didn't know where to start. So I just started talking to people and asking questions, going all over the community. And by the beginning of January in 1973, we'd gotten to the point where the council allowed me to appoint a kind of steering committee of 9 people. And Vi Simpson, I did that with the permission or with the agreement of the county council and with the support of Vi Simpson, who was the auditor. And I created a 9-member group to be our advisors, first of all. And that included 2 co-chairs. One of them was Scott Schurz, who was publisher of the newspaper, and who said, Charlotte, I don't care what you do, you've got to tear that down. You've got to tear that thing down. The county courthouse. He said, it's dirty, it smells bad, it's too small, it's not doing its work. We've had it too long. Tear it down, just build a new building there. And this co-chair I named Rick Zabriskie, who some of you might remember. He was the head of the historic preservation group here. And I thought, looking back, I think, what was I thinking? But then I also had people like Lester de Coker, who was down in Indian Creek. And he had led the remonstrances against 3 petition drives that were unsuccessful. So his remonstrances were successful. The petition drives were not. And he said, I don't care what you do, Charlotte, as long as you don't spend a penny of the taxpayers' money. I said, well, sir, I can't promise that. But, and Judge Dixon was up on the 3rd floor of the courthouse with the ceiling falling down on his desk. And he said, Charlotte, I don't care what you do about the courthouse. Just get those people out of that jail down there, which is a fire hazard, and get them out of there before they're incinerated. So that was just for starters. I had some people who were maybe a little bit more reasonable, but I was dealing with absolutely no direction. And I said, all I'm asking is that you sit here, that we spend months or however long it takes to come to some conclusion on what our problem is. And I said, that doesn't sound exciting, but it's really important. We have to figure out what is it that we have to do here. And because I have talked to people all over town, and and I see no consensus whatsoever. I haven't heard any. And they're very strong-minded people who want me to do this or that. And I said, it's not going to be my decision. It's got to be a community decision. Because it's too important to let it go. So, and we did, and what in remembering, in thinking about this, and this is what I learned in these 4 years, is that I was president for 2 years, and I learned, first of all, when you're president, you're not supposed to talk. You're supposed to let other people talk. But you may have your own idea, but you're not there to tell people what to do. You're there to help them. And in the county situation, I realized there was no way I could. Some of my best friends, of course, said, Charlotte, you just stay at the courthouse. And I said, I can't do that because I can't promise that. I don't see how we can get there unless we go this circuitous route. So we did that. And it was an incredible learning experience for me and for the community, I think. And people were very happy about the courthouse. I know right now they're not happy about the jail, but the jail had to be done too. And we had to get people out of a situation in which the cell block had something like 40 cells, and they were each opened with a padlock and a key. If you can imagine how, if you've ever fiddled around with a padlock, what if there were a fire? How many padlocks could you open, how quickly? And the cell block itself was open with a padlock and a key. And the door to the cell block at that time was in the kitchen. And the kitchen had a history of grease fires. So it was not a joke. I mean, we really had an imperiled group. And so we had to, that was pressure too. But eventually, thank goodness, a lot of people helped. Tom Hirons, I'm sure some of you remember that wonderful sort of motto, the logo, with the stylized courthouse and the fish on top.
Yes.
Yeah, the red and white one. And he created that. I said, once we got a little bit along the way, I said, Tom, we're going to need a campaign. And with a campaign, we have to have materials to cheer us on. And he designed that. And the Trojan horse, Fine Light, and Rogers Building Supply funded all the costs of that. And that was interesting too, because Rick Rector was the head of the Rogers Building Supplies, Rogers Brothers. And he did not like me. But he now this is a story people don't want to hear. But Bill Cook had sent a letter to 12 people saying, Charlotte, you know, we know you're stupid and can't get this done, so I'll do it. But only if you give me I give him, make that very clear, $2 million, and he can, and then hands off. He will promise that no elected official will talk to him and give their ideas. Give him carte blanche, and he'll come back with a solution. And he sent that to a bunch of people. And I will say, when I got it the first time, I hadn't seen it. And John Lampkins was the president of the Carpenters Union, the Labor Council here. John Lampkins, Labor Council. He was waving this paper at me in the street. He said, "Charlotte, you can't do this. You can't do this. We have prevailing wage. You know, you just can't turn this over to Bill Cook." I said, "John, don't worry about it. I can't. That would be illegal. And I don't have $2 million to give away. So don't worry about it." But I got back to the office, and it was Rick Rector on the phone saying, "Charlotte, come over here right now." So I immediately ran over to Rogers. He waving this paper at me saying, "Now we know who has the biggest ego in town." Okay. And he said, "Whatever you need to take care of this, I will help pay for it." Well, that was a surprise. See, you never know. That's one of my conclusions. You never know. If it's unexpected. If you try to do the right thing, things come forward. So anyway, that's the background of how we got money to have a campaign. And they paid for all those materials, the bumper stickers and the posters and the little can covers and the huge paintings that were on the cupola and on the street banners with it. And then Randy Siskel, who was a very serious Republican, volunteered to set up a table at the Monroe County Fair and collected signatures supporting the Save the Courthouse. Nobody expected that, but he was roused to do that. So I am. People ask me if I'm an optimist, and I am. I mean, well, how can I be an optimist in this messy world we have? But I do believe that good things can happen if we work at them and if we work together. And that's what I want this book to say to you. So now, do you have another question? You'll be sorry. Yeah.
So Charlotte, if I were to nutshell it, part of your success, you feel, was really engaging the community.
Yes.
And partnerships between the community and the council, and your collaborative relationship between the council and the mayor.
Yes.
Given how long you've been in Bloomington, I'm wondering if there are a top 2 or 3 things that you would like to see happen in the city that would be an improvement.
Well, I do think that people I think there needs to be more collaboration. It's obvious to me, this whole brouhaha that we're having about the jail now. I think if we could sit down and talk, and who wants a stinky jail? Nobody wants a stinky jail. It's inhumane, and we're not inhumane people as a society. So I think that we should be able to find people in every. I think the sheriff has come off running, and he's I think right about being upset about the condition of the jail. But it's complicated. The construction of the jail is complicated. We had to get a new jail. That was part 2. And the solution to the space needs problem was not my suggestion. It was what people came up with. Because we at the end of our deliberations on this, I went to Mayor McCloskey and I said, "Frank, I want you to help me pick 150 people from the community, random, I don't care, and get them to review the recommendations for solving the space needs." And he did that. And then we had a meeting of these 150 people out at at the IU Foundation. And we gave them copies of a report that had been put together by Larry Burke, the architect, which had 5 options, one of which was do nothing, the other one was tear it down. So there were some in-between things there, of course. And they decided on the one I would have chosen, which is to save the courthouse and renovate it and make it another jewel of our community, and then build a second building, which is what we did. But we had to find a place to build that building, and we knew that we had to have, so we wanted to have everything together. And there was, and the recommendation of the consultant that we got suggested that it would be best. We could do that all in one building. We traveled around the country the way the county commissioners did too, but we didn't go by ourselves. We had a bunch of different people. We went to different jails and communities to see what had happened. Because I told them, one of the things I said was, bring any idea that you have in here, and we'll discuss it openly and without fussing, without aggravation. So people felt free to say dumb things. And I was willing to hear dumb things because, people, we were going to build a pole barn out at 46 and 37. I don't think so. But let's talk about what's wrong with that idea, what's good about that idea, and what's wrong with that idea. And does that solve the problem? Well, no, it didn't. It wouldn't, because we all agreed that government had to be downtown, and the people felt very strongly, and this was Larry Burke's contribution, that having city, we needed the courthouse, not because it was a beautiful building, because it really didn't need cleaning up, but because it was central and it gave a heart to the community. And it does, it's a focus to the community. And having a lively downtown makes a difference in people's feeling about the town. So we, of course, I did my own personal part, Marilyn Schultz and I, by starting goods. And that was an interesting experiment, which worked. Amazing. But did I answer your question?
Partly, my other thought was just, what would a priority action item be in Bloomington? For me personally, I'm really longing for us to get more affordable housing.
Well, of course, that's yeah, right now. That's not an easy question, is it? And I don't want to get into the mayor's race, but of course I do. But I think it's not an easy thing. And I think that one of the things we have not done, we have not talked to the university. There has not been collaboration with the university, which is a critical part of this whole picture. They keep bringing in students, but they stop building dormitories. And the mayor came in apparently with a vision that I don't understand, which is just build as many buildings as we can in the private sector and make them fancy and unaffordable. And that's what's happened. So that was not a discussion that we had in the community. That's not something that everybody said, oh, let's build more apartment buildings. In fact, we haven't heard that. But we need a community discussion of this. There has really been no consensus on how to solve this. And I think that's very important. And it's very expensive. I think we're building ourselves into a we're kind of buying ourselves a bad future. Because I am very concerned about the infrastructure. And, I live downtown now, which I like. But, how many streets have been closed, how often? And they close them and open them. One of these days, those streets are going to wear out. They're going to be tired and say, don't fix me again. But meanwhile, we have the sewer and the water situation. We have to have adequate water. And I do have this vision of those things out by Target where everybody flushes the toilet at the same time, and then what's going to happen? I don't want to be here. Because I think that's not a silly thing to thought of. But we haven't talked about that as a community, and it hasn't been. There's been no farm bill constructed where we can go in and say, no, not talk about it. And you know what? I don't think that incentivizing builders and contractors from out of town who the mayor thinks should. We have this experience that developers have to pay something to get the privilege of building things, and several contractors don't like that. I mean, that's immoral, I think. So we've done that. We haven't had a discussion about that. We in our newspapers, and sadly, one of the things that happened one of the things about this election in 71 was we had 2 newspapers, really 3, with the IDF. They don't always know what's really going on, but anyway, we had the Herald Times, the Herald Telephone, and we had the Courier Tribune, which was a very conservative newspaper, and then we had WTTS and WTIU, WFIU, and WBWB. We had lots of press, and they were competing with each other. And so we had lots of access to talking about issues and getting people involved. And we don't have that right now, and that's really detrimental, I think. Because we aren't, when these things get discussed, they become little arguments rather than an attempt to say, how can we solve this? How can we work together? I really have asked, I said, how do what have we talked to the university? Of course, the university now has a new president, and we don't have the history now. We had Herman Wells at the time, and the university was a little bit more involved. Herman Wells was a sponsor, he was the honorary chair of the Save the Courthouse Committee. And Herman Wells, he would walk around downtown, he'd stop in the soda fountain, in sporting goods store at the soda fountain and talk to people. And we don't have any of that now, that kind of communication. And the university has grown a lot, and it keeps growing, and there doesn't seem to be any apparent discussion about what the impact on the community, how much it can bear. And I don't know that we can do anything about it, but I think we should be discussing it openly and in a constructive manner. Did you all hear was that clear? Good, thank you. I think so. A collaboration is super important, and I'm fortunate. Cheryl Munson is here. She's on the county council. I don't know if there are any other officials here today, but I'm sure she would agree with that. Because it's easy. And what I also know is that people don't understand how their government is, how the government works. People don't know the difference between the county council and the city council and the relationship of the county council to the commissioners. Unfortunately, I've had a lot of life education on that issue. And I think it's really important. We're very fortunate. We have many very smart and caring people. And yet, at the moment, they're not talking to each other in a constructive way. They're trying, but I think we should be demanding that as citizens. We should be demanding that people talk to each other and that they help us and that they let us participate. Because I'm just a citizen now. And just a citizen, Harry Truman also always said when he left the presidency, I'm being demoted, I'm going back to being a citizen. I've always liked Harry Truman. But that I think is important. Any other questions?
I just wanted to have each of you talk about the response you've gotten from the book, and where do you think it will go? I mean, I look at it as being a companion piece to Marianne Winkoff's Descent in the Heartland, and becoming a grassroots politics lesson for political scientists and that sort of thing. So, if each of you could talk about that.
Well, of course, I think everybody should read it. And not only that, memorize it. I just got a phone call from a friend in California, and she doesn't live here at all. She never did live here. She just knows me. But I sent the book to her, and she loved it. I was so pleased. She really liked it, and why? She said it communicated to her a hopeful way of dealing with things. And she liked the stories of people like Nancy Salmon, who was a famed person. She had a salon in effect, and we don't have much of that. In my room, my condo isn't big enough for all of you, although you're all welcome. But I think just sitting around and talking to people, with people, is and I think the book, if people read it and they think about it, I may be wrong. Fortunately, I can't read my book. I have to tell you that. My eyes are not good. But there's a new person in this community who joined Rotary, and she said something about the book, and I told her I can't read it. And she said, I'll read it. And she's been reading it to me and online, which is really sweet of her. But I think she's new to the city, and she's learning a lot about it. And I don't know, Linda was very nice and said, Linda Williamson here says she liked it, and she said should be required reading. So I don't know. I hope there's something in it for everyone. I hope people take. There's a little thing at the back, the epilogue, which says, kind of sums up my thinking. And one of them is, nothing doesn't count. And you never know. You never know, I think, is one of the most important things. Because you never, I'll tell you, here's something that you never know. I was lying in bed a couple of years ago thinking, I've got all this stuff on paper and I've typed it, and it's this big now. And I said, I don't know what I'm going to do with this, and I want to finish it. And Julie Lawson, who's a godsend, literally, she said she would work with me. Can you imagine? Wow. And we spent hours and hours and hours and hours sitting at the computer and going over every sentence and every paragraph and every chapter, taking some out, putting some back in. And Steve Olin, who is a very interesting guy here in town, said, I really like what this is about, but he said, it's you don't know how to punctuate. And he's on the spectrum, which he readily acknowledges. And so he's OCD. He just can't stand a misplaced semicolon or a misspelled word. And he said, I'll just read the book and fix it. And so that was, he just came from nowhere. And then there's Penn, who is unbelievable. He just showed up at my house one day, and I knew his wife, and he said, okay, this is a good book. I think we should have it spread across the nation. And I said, I had no idea what his background was. I've just gradually got it out of him. But he's been wonderful. And I have a friend, Don Adams, who I called him and I said, Don, you know how to do things. And he was the first one, actually. And I called him and I said, Don, I've got this book and I just don't know what I'm going to do about it. And I said, I need your help. So he came over and said, I'll do whatever you want, Charlotte. And he went out. He said, I don't know anything about publishing a book or anything, but he has a lot of faith in me. And so he immediately went in and did some research and came back with how to publish a book thing like this. And then Penn showed up and said he was going to make it happen. But Don helped make it happen by contributing some money to it. So who else am I missing? No.
It was basically a committee.
It was,
Okay.
yeah, it was a committee. And all of a sudden it was there. And they
And
were,
if you know anything about editing or writing, having a committee is not the way to do it.
but it worked.
But it worked.
But it worked.
That has to do with the people, and it has to do with Charlotte. And her mind and her point of view is electrifying. I've worked with a lot of people in a lot of businesses at very high levels. And working with Charlotte was just a stunning experience. And Julia, and everybody just gave their best. That was it. So one thing that always happens among really good people in whatever business we happen to be in, entertainment, film, publishing, they just give their best because this is it. And that's a wonderful experience to
Yeah, I
share.
must say, it was just wonderful. I'd sit there and think, wow, how lucky I am. How lucky.
But to answer your question a little more briefly or closely, we're doing okay. The book is being published by me, but it's through major publishing company, Ingram. And Ingram is connected to Publishers Group West. It's connected to Amazon. It's connected to every single retailer in the country. And it has a pretty good marketing program. They're very clean. They're very precise. And but this is not a book where we have a ton of money to put into ads and stuff like that. And it has an organic quality to it. So that's what we're really hoping for is people will like it. They will pass it on. They will say, look, there's some lessons here. This isn't just somebody talking about their past. This isn't just a happy book about my memories. This is a school of thought that needs to be examined, appreciated, analyzed, and shared. And that's what we're hoping for.
Yeah.
Thank you, Charlotte.
Thank you. This is for the community.
Sure.
No, I'm done. We finished? I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay, thanks. I'm just wondering, it seems to me that the group of people that you led or participated in that election, the way you describe it grew out of the Bloomington's 1960s experience of this large expansion of the university with faculty who had female spouses who didn't have outlets for their professional qualities. I'm kind of, and the 60s was a special period in that sense. It was a period of rapid expansion of higher education across the United States. And so I'm wondering, to some extent, whether, obviously each individual's initiative counted more than anything, but in a sort of structural way, was it a reflection of that change of balance within this micro region here that the university expansion created?
I'm not sure I can answer. I know that there were a lot of, I have a chapter, I think, in there about faculty spouses. I have a chapter about faculty spouses and how, of course, here I come with my doctor's degree. And what can I do? I could maybe get a job at a retail store. And there was a lot going on And there were just wonderful, wonderful resources in the faculty spouses. Almost nothing at the university itself, because of its policy, supposedly. Anyway, so that made a difference, I think, and a lot of them were working on the capital on the campaign too, and in the community, and became allies and assistants. But I don't think the times are that different. I think we're talking about human beings and the way they get along with each other. And I think that now there's no excuse. You know, maybe there's an awful lot of interest. There's interest in making things better. And we're now overrunning with agencies that are functioning pretty well, but they're not all functioning in a collaborative fashion. So I would say maybe we've got much of a muchness. That there maybe we've. I always worried that we were succeeding too much, that we needed to groom some Republicans to work with us. But I think that's no, today it's not a possibility very much. I mean, I believe in the better, what is it, the better angel, that theory. But there doesn't seem to be a lot of enthusiasm around here. But I still, but there are just tons of people doing all sorts of good things in this community. And I do think it would, well, I think maybe we're spinning in too many areas, that we need to start thinking about working together with other ones. I don't know, that doesn't answer your question.
Sort of, yes. Sort of. I mean, there's a bit of a town gown thing, and it's
interesting.
Broader than literally town gown.
Yes, it is. Yeah. And the fact of the matter, right now, at that time, as you remember, that 1971, May of 1971 was the first time that 18-year-olds could vote. And that was the 26th Amendment. And so that was a huge change. And there was a lot of fear among the people in the town that the students would take over and run things, which, we did have students involved in the campaign, and they were very good and supportive. But I knew that my own experience is and has been that students do not want to do something wrong. They don't want to, or at least they didn't used to want to get in there and just do something for the sake of doing it. That they were worried that they may make a mistake, and so we campaigned a lot with students, but I knew that we wouldn't get a very good response. And my book actually, yes, I went back and checked the figures, the voting records, and the students did not carry the election, which is what some of the people said. This is a student election. I said it really wasn't, but now I'm hearing that we absolutely have to have a student on the city council. And of course, the one student that filed to be the only student didn't do his homework. And so it's kind of ironic so I don't know what's going to happen with that. But in fact, and we've got some very nice young people running for office, but they really don't know much about what the city is. But then who does? I don't know. So,
well, I'll just say that I think we're wrapping it up, and books are for sale right out there. If you haven't already bought some, buy some for your Christmas presents. And there are cookies, and there's lemonade, and take some home. Yeah.
Are we providing autographs?
Of course,
All right.
not very legible, but yes.
Maybe you need a stamp or something.
No. You get the real deal.
All right.
And thanks again for everyone for coming out. This is a
Thank you.
very engaging afternoon.